Okay, where do I start? I have been delaying this for quite a while. This iFi Goba Kensei here. I have been playing with it for over 2 months now. So I'd like to apologize first to those people who has been asking me to review this Kensei here. But today, as I am relaxing here, finally I have the opportunity to talk about it. Okay, so let's talk about this iFi Goba Kensei. Kensei is not cheap. Depending on where you are, it can go as high as 600 US dollar or as low as 550 US dollar. And let's just have a look first and foremost with the build and the construction of this Kensei here. If you are already familiar with iFi Goba, which I reviewed over a year ago, then you would know that this thing is entirely made of metal, and it is even more special. Let's just have a look first. What does Kensei mean? In Japanese, Kensei means sword saint, entirely made of Japanese steel, which I think, if memory serves me correctly, this Kensei weighs a bit heavier because of that steel construction as compared to the original iFi Goba. They are pretty much very similar in many ways, identical in terms of dimension and size, except for the weight. And of course, with the function itself, the buttons you can find all around. We have this IE match, which is so very iconic to iFi. And of course, you have this independent volume adjustment, which I believe is 100 step. Battery endurance when attached to my phone here, which is Xiaomi Mi 90. 4000 mAh of battery and running Hibi Music app in USB exclusive mode, 4.4mm balance, driving 32 ohm IEM. I was able to get at around 7 hours of runtime before my phone ran out of battery. So pretty much below par, I would say. Anything under 8 hours is something which I would consider as heavy on the hose. And also take into consideration that after using it for like over 1 hour, you can feel the heat coming from this Kensei because it is entirely made of steel. So aside from being aesthetic, I think the construction and the design of this Kensei is meant to dissipate heat faster so that you can enjoy the music better. So what exactly is the deal with this Kensei? The keyword itself, like I say, sword saint. It is in fact a term iFi used to label their K2HD technology or high performing filter, which you can easily toggle using this button here. And I'll just try to describe this in the most concise way possible based on my understanding. K2HD is essentially a filter designed to implement organic, natural analog sound while retaining high fidelity, high quality resolution, imaging, and all that macro and micro details without sounding digital. Alright, so that is the kind of thing which I love. So for example, the original iFi Goba was already analog and organic sounding to me. But in the process of doing so, it does sound a bit subdued when it comes to outright resolution. Because if you are the type of person who love high fidelity, studio kind of, output, then you might find that the original iFi Goba lacking in that element. Now with Kensei here, okay, iFi have managed to actually implement something which is amazing, really. I have been playing it for quite a while, and it's safe to say that up until now, I have been using it like for 2 months. I do not see myself being able to use this Kensei without that K2HD filter being turned off. It is permanently always switched on. The caveat, only one. If you choose to run, if you want to run K2HD or the Kensei mode, you only can do it in PCM resolution up to 368 kHz. So it is in fact the kind of filter designed to actually enhance those PCM files to a point that it matches the kind of DSD resolution. Because if you do play DSD on this Kensei, then you would not be able to run the K2HD mode. And also on top of that, this thing offer very effective filter. Let me just quickly have a look here. Okay, so as I can see here, there are 4 significant type of filter which you can choose by just simply toggling the buttons here. and the first one being colored as cyan, which is BP, bit perfect. Bit perfect means that in different terms they call it non-oversampling, so it plays as it is, okay? And it is in fact one of my favorite filter. This is a secondary filter, by the way, on top of that K2 HD. And another one which is called red, which is the standard filter. So kind of a bit moderate kind of filtration, and I would just simply admit that it is also my favorite as well, because it does sound kind of a bit somewhere between being analytical and being analog musical, not too colored. And the most colored would be the GTO. I can't exactly remember what that is, but it is definitely the kind of filter which adds a lot of coloration. It sounded a lot more dynamic, a lot more engaging, vibrant, but it does not sound transparent. And the last one would be yellow, which is minimum phase. Minimum phase means that if you are pairing it with something which is relatively bright sounding, then you might want to consider using minimum phase, because it will introduce slow roll off, which is usually suitable for bright sounding partners. Surprisingly, when I compare this Kensei here with the original iFi Go Bar, which I used to own, I think the power rating is slightly less on this Kensei, at just 477 milliwatt of power per channel, because if I recall correctly, that original iFi Go Bar was rated at over 700 milliwatt of power. I would just simply say that this Kensei is more than enough to power my headphone here, which is Sennheiser HD 600 here, 300 ohm, and I was able to get proper listening loudness when using the 4.4mm balance port at around 36 out of 100 of volume. So that is super impressive with the power itself, because in contrast, another two favorite dongle of mine, which is this Onyx Alpha and iBasso DC07 Pro, both of them offer in excess of 500 milliwatt of power per channel. So that 477 seems to be kind of like a bit more powerful than these two when it comes to actual implementation. Natural, organic, analog sound. If you're familiar with my channel, then you might have already heard me saying that word repeatedly over and over again, because that's basically the kind of sound which I love. And I can say that this iFi Go Bar Kensei here is definitely one of the most analog sounding dongle which I have listened to so far, especially in that K2 HD mode or Kensei mode. Very similar to the likes of this Onyx Alpha here, which I dearly love, and also this iBasso DC07 Pro, and also not forgetting something like Hebe FC6, and also Centrance Deckport HD, Questar M12i, EPZ TP50, and the list goes on and on and on. But how does this Kensei differ from the rest is that the articulation of details while doing that analog sound. So like I mentioned earlier, you get to preserve that high fidelity while having very analog temperament to the timbre itself, the tonality. I have been testing this Kensei with this Hydis MP145 and this Let's Shure S12 2024 edition, both of them magnetic planar, by the way. And if you're familiar with magnetic planar, they can sound a bit metallic, a bit dry when you attach it to something which is kind of like too hi-fi or even, let's say, bright sounding. But when I use it with this Kensei here, the kind of sound which I'm getting is something, again, I'm just gonna repeat myself, very well balanced towards being analytical and musical. There's overall smoothness throughout the entire frequency range, anywhere from lower frequency, mid-range to the upper frequency. I do not hear any kind of coloration, depending on which filter you choose. The sound itself is pretty much truthful to being transparent, uncolored. Definitely it excels top-notch when it comes to details, macro and micro details, imaging, soundstage. The sound is wide and open sounding. And if you love sub-bass, definitely you would want to turn on the XBass here. Now, I have been trying quite a bit of XBass function from iFi, even from the Hip Deck and even from the Zen series. And I would say that the boosting of the lower frequency, the bass itself on this Kensei is pretty much very mild, to a point that it boosts up the sub bass, not so much on the mid bass, but definitely will be quite appealing for people who love big bass. The price is kind of a bit steep, yes, I will admit that, paying as close as $600 for a dongle. But then again, let's just consider some of the things that you're going to get back for that price. First and foremost, of course, the build itself. Let's just have a look again at the build of this Kensei here. Okay, entirely made of Japanese steel. So it is heavy, it is robust, and on top of that, let's just consider some of the function that it offers. Some of the very best function in the market nowadays for dongles, like XBass, the only dongle that offer XBass, and also the only dongle which offer expand, which expand the soundstage itself. And on top of that, 4 very effective, very usable filter. And also, finally, perhaps the most important one, the Kensei K2 HD filter, which literally transformed this Kensei into a high fidelity analog sounding dongle.